The street had always been quiet in the way that felt intentional, like everyone living there had silently agreed to mind their own business. Maple Hollow Drive sat just outside a mid-sized town, lined with identical two-story houses, trimmed lawns, and cars that rarely moved during the day. People waved. Some smiled. Most didn't linger. That was why what happened felt so wrong. It started on a Tuesday morning when Daniel Mercer stepped outside to grab his mail. He was 34, recently divorced, and had moved into the neighborhood less than 6 months earlier. He worked nights at a distribution warehouse, slept through most mornings, and kept to himself. To his neighbors, he was polite but forgettable. That morning, Daniel noticed something odd immediately. Nearly every mailbox on the street was open. At first, he thought maybe the mail carrier had rushed through and forgotten to close them. But as he walked down his driveway, he saw people standing outside their homes, holding envelopes. Some were talking in low voices. Others stood frozen, staring at the papers in their hands. Daniel checked his own mailbox. Empty. No bills. No ads. No letters. He shrugged it off at first. Mail got delayed sometimes. But as he walked toward his car, Mrs. Caldwell from across the street called out to him. "Daniel," she said, her voice tight. "Did you get one too?" "Get what?" he asked. She hesitated, then held up a plain white envelope. No return address. Just her name, handwritten in neat, careful letters. "Everyone got one," she said. "Everyone except you, it seems." That was the first time Daniel felt the discomfort settle in his chest. By that afternoon, the street buzzed with quiet panic. Neighbors gathered in small groups, comparing notes. Every envelope was identical. Same handwriting, same cheap paper, same message inside. Daniel didn't see the letters himself at first. No one wanted to show him. Eventually, one of the neighbors, an older man named Harold Finch, pulled him aside near the sidewalk. "You should know what's in them," Harold said, glancing around before lowering his voice. "Even if you didn't get one." Daniel nodded slowly. "Know what?" Harold unfolded the letter with trembling fingers and read aloud. "This is a warning. Someone on your street is dangerous. He appears normal, quiet, polite, but he has hurt people before, and he will again. Watch who you trust. Lock your doors." There was more details about keeping distance, about noticing strange behavior, but Daniel stopped listening. His stomach dropped. That's not funny," Daniel said. "Who would do this?" Harold swallowed. "That's what we're trying to figure out." The realization hit Daniel almost immediately, unspoken but heavy. Every house got the letter, except his. That night, Daniel barely slept. From his bedroom window, he saw porch lights flick on and stay lit. Curtains twitched. A car idled across the street longer than necessary. He told himself they were just scared, that it was a prank, a sick joke. But fear has a way of spreading. The next day, no one waved. At the grocery store, Daniel noticed two neighbors whispering as he passed. At home, a package he'd ordered was left at the curb instead of his porch. When he tried to say hello to the couple next door, they pretended not to hear him. By the third day, someone had taped a printed copy of the letter to a street sign at the end of the block. Daniel finally managed to read the full thing. It mentioned timelines, past incidents, blackouts, unexplained injuries, people who didn't remember what they'd done. Daniel laughed when he finished reading, but the sound came out wrong. He didn't have blackouts. At least, he didn't think he did. That evening, Daniel drove to the police station. He brought a photo of the letter he'd taken from the sign. He explained the situation calmly, carefully. The officer behind the desk listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable. When Daniel finished, the officer nodded and said, You're not the first person to come in about this. Good, Daniel said. So you know it's a hoax. The officer didn't answer right away. He typed something into his computer, then looked back up. What's your address again? He asked. Daniel told him. The officer's fingers paused on the keyboard. Mr. Mercer, he said slowly, how long have you lived there? Almost 6 months. And before that, Daniel hesitated. An apartment downtown. Why? The officer leaned back slightly. Did you know the previous tenant of your house disappeared? Daniel felt a chill run through him. No, I wasn't told that. Neither was the tenant before him, the officer said. Daniel left the station feeling worse than when he'd arrived. That night, he dreamed he was standing in his living room, watching himself pace back and forth. The version of him in the dream had blood on his hands. When Daniel tried to speak, the other him turned and smiled. He woke up gasping. The next morning, there was a knock at his door. 2 officers stood on his porch. They were polite, calm. They asked if they could come in. Daniel let them. They didn't accuse him of anything. They asked questions instead, about his job, his sleep. Whether he ever woke up in places he didn't remember falling asleep. Daniel answered honestly. Then one of the officers asked, "Do you recognize this?" He held up a photocopy of a handwritten letter. Daniel stared at it. The handwriting was identical to the warning letter. "Where did you get that?" Daniel asked. The officer didn't answer. "Daniel," the other one said gently, "we've had similar letters turn up before, years apart. Always in neighborhoods where people later went missing." Daniel's mouth went dry. "And what happened to the people who wrote them?" "They never remembered writing them," the officer said. The truth came together slowly, horribly. Medical records surfaced, old police reports. A childhood diagnosis Daniel's parents had buried and never spoken of. Dissociative episodes, violent sleepwalking, entire days missing from his memory. In letters, handwritten warnings, mailed to strangers by a version of himself that only existed when he wasn't aware. The letters weren't meant to frame him. They were meant to stop him. Daniel was taken in for observation. The neighbors were told he'd moved away. Life on Maple Hollow Drive returned to normal. 6 months later, new families moved into the empty house. The lawns were trimmed, the mailboxes repainted. On a quiet Tuesday morning, envelopes appeared on every porch. Every porch except one.